So today I want to discuss something that I think is important to everybody that is interested in discussing or practicing apologetics, and that would be the man Flavius Josephus. Flavius Josephus is basically a historian in the first century, and he's so important to Christian apologetics because he is one of the best attestations to Jesus Christ that we have outside of the Bible. Josephus has always been controversial, though. He's not just controversial in 2024. During his own lifetime, he actually sided with the Romans during a Jewish rebellion and did his best to act as a mediator between the Romans and the Jews. Romans disliked him because he was Jewish, and Jewish people disliked him because he collaborated with the Romans. In reality, Josephus was just trying to do what was best for himself. And if you know anything about Josephus's life, you'll realize that he probably wasn't the best guy in the world. Having said that, he was an excellent historian, and he's one of the most important sources for us today when we're studying Judaism and ancient Israel. Now, what's the controversy that we have today? The controversy we have today revolves around a particular quote from Josephus's book, Antiquities of the Jews. This is Antiquities of the Jews, 1863. That's the passage if you guys want to look it up. The issue here is that anti-apologeticists, or people who are just plain skeptics of the Bible, have heard through the grapevine that this particular passage is a forgery. And in reality, Josephus never mentioned Christ. They're only half correct. But before we continue, let me read this full passage for you. About this time lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was the achiever of extraordinary deeds and was a teacher of those who accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. When he was indicted by the principal men among us, and Pilate condemned him to be crucified, those who had come to love him originally did not cease to do so. For he appeared to them on the third day, restored to life, as the prophets of the deity had foretold. These and countless other marvelous things about him, and the tribe of Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. What's important for us to understand and remember when we're talking to people that accuse this passage of being a forgery is that there are three primary positions about this passage, and two of them are held by the extreme minority. The first position on this passage is that it is not a forgery in any way. All of it is original to Josephus. This is the minority position. Not very many people believe this, and it is unlikely. The second position is that all of it is a forgery. And just like the first position, this is a minority of people. Very few scholars believe that this passage was never written by Josephus. The third position, and the position that is held by the majority of scholars, is that there are theologically Christian interpolations within the text. However, the text itself, in its basic form, is original to Josephus. What's important for us to remember is that there are 0 extant manuscripts of Antiquities of the Jews that omit this passage. That means there are 0 reasons to think that this passage is not original to Josephus. Now, that being said, there are 3 in particular. There might be more. I'm not a scholar, so this is just what I'm reading on the internet. There are 3 places in this quote in particular that people think are later Christian additions or later Christian edits. In the first line, he says, about this time lived Jesus, a wise man. And then he makes the comment, if indeed one ought to call him a man. This seems odd. Remember that Josephus, he is not a Christian. He does not relent to the Christian theological claim that Jesus Christ is divine or the Messiah. He's Jewish. And he has rejected Christ. So it seems very odd that he makes almost an implicative statement of giving in to Christian theology. The second one comes from a few lines down. He just simply declares in the middle of his paragraph that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. Again, Josephus is not Christian, so this seems a little bit out of place. And the third place is when he records that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. He says, for he appeared to them on the third day, restored to life. And so these are the 3 primary objections that scholars have for this quote. These are most likely Christian, later Christian interpolations. However, there is another manuscript tradition for Josephus discovered around the 10th century, and we have an alternative reading for this passage, and I'm going to read that for you here now. It says, "At this time there was a wise man called Jesus, and his conduct was good." And I'm going to pause right here real quick. I'm going to point out a few key differences between this reading and the reading that we just read from the 3rd century. So let me restart here. At this time there was a wise man called Jesus, and his conduct was good. Immediately, right off the bat, we're missing the statement, if indeed one ought to call him a man. We're missing the theological claim or implication here. And his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. Many people among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die, but those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. Again, this claim that he was the Messiah that we find in the middle of the paragraph that we read earlier, it's missing. It's nowhere to be found. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. Now, this is another switch. In the paragraph we read earlier, Josephus makes the claim that Jesus Christ did rise on the 3rd day and that he did appear to his disciples. Now, I believe that is to be true, but it seems uncharacteristic of Josephus, of a man who has rejected the divinity of Jesus Christ. It seems much more likely that this reading that I'm reading to you guys now is more precise, more accurate. Again, they reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah. Again, there's doubt. Concerning whom the prophets had reported wonders, and the tribe of the Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. Now, in reality, there's no real way to know which reading is accurate. However, there are evidences that the first reading is less accurate and that we should go along with the second reading. We can never know for sure. There is no proof for this. But despite all that, I decided to compile a short list of things that we can gather about Jesus Christ from Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, the 10th century reading, right? If we completely miss out on the things that scholars claim are interpolations, what can we know about Jesus Christ? Number one, we know that Jesus Christ existed. That's an easy one. Second of all, Jesus was considered a wise and virtuous man. Number three, he was a leader of a religious group. Number four, he was crucified. Number five, there were alleged appearances of Jesus Christ 3 days after he died. Number six, he was believed by some to be the Messiah. And number seven, Christianity has a strong group of people as a result of this alleged resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, as a Christian, you don't have to give up this really strong evidence, extra biblical evidence for the existence of Jesus Christ. You don't have to give it up. But listen, even if the haters were correct and the entire passage is a forgery, what they don't realize is there is another passage in Josephus that mentions the man Jesus Christ as well. We'll go ahead and read that here together. This is taken from Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 20 and verse 200. Having such a character, Ananus thought that with Festus dead and Albinus still on the way, he would have the proper opportunity. Convening the judges of the Sanhedrin, he brought before them the brother of Jesus, who is called the Christ, whose name was James, and certain others. He accused them of having transgressed the law and delivered them up to be stoned. Now, this passage is not disputed. This is unanimously believed to be original to Josephus. And this doesn't provide as many details about the life of Jesus. However, we know that this is the same Jesus because Josephus is specific. This is the Jesus that people called the Christ. And this is the Jesus who is the brother of James. That is corroborated in the New Testament. The New Testament tells us that James is the brother of Jesus Christ. Now, I also want to mention very quickly Josephus's wording here. When he mentions Jesus, he is automatically suspicious. He doesn't say Jesus who is the Christ. He says Jesus who was called the Christ. And it's for this sake that the earlier reading that we read is in question when he so readily calls Jesus absolutely the Messiah. All of this is really to say that when you bring up Josephus as an extra biblical attestation to the historical life and existence of Jesus Christ, when they say, hold on, that's a forgery, you don't have to be stumbled with that because they don't understand what they're talking about. But now you do.